My name is Lorraine Mercer, 29 years old. When I first pulled into the Willoughby Estates winding driveway, I thought I had the wrong address. The text from my sister April had said, "Casual dinner, nothing big." But this wasn't casual. This was three-tiered fountains, clipped hedges, a valet stand gleaming under chandeliers of light. Not a restaurant, not a family-friendly bistro. This was one of the most expensive wedding venues in the state. I sat in my car a beat too long. The silk scarf I'd bought for Mom still folded on the passenger seat, the ribbon slipping loose as if mocking me. Something twisted in my stomach. I should have known. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lilies and lemon polish, like a museum no one dared touch. A banquet table stretched across the room, set with silverware so pristine it could blind. And at the center sat a glossy box wrapped in gold foil, a cream bow perched on top like a crown. "Lorraine's here!" Dad boomed as if he'd been rehearsing the line. Everyone clapped, all at once, too quick, like they'd practiced. April stood near a display of mock-up centerpieces, beaming. My younger brother Drew lounged against the bar with a drink in his hand, smirking like he knew the punchline to a joke I hadn't been told. I tried to smile, but my throat was dry. They guided me to the head of the table. "Open it," Mom urged, her eyes glittering. I hesitated. Maybe it was something sweet. A photo album, a memory box, some inside joke. My hands peeled away the foil, lifted the lid. Inside was an envelope. Thick. I slid the papers out and felt my chest seize. My name, printed in bold at the top. $30,164. Listed as the deposit for the Willoughby estate. October 18th. April and Brandon's wedding. For a second I laughed. A brittle, disbelieving laugh that cracked in the air. "Good one," I muttered, waiting for someone to join in. No one did. Dad stepped closer, clapping me on the back like he'd knighted me. "This is your contribution," he declared, his tone almost triumphant. "You didn't like the first venue. This one's better. We figured you'd get behind it." I stared at him, at April, at Drew. Their faces were solemn, expectant, like this was the most natural thing in the world. I managed one word. "Oh." April's smile faltered, but she said nothing. Drew rolled his shoulders back, eyes gleaming. Then, without warning, he stood, lifted his glass, a bright red cocktail glinting like blood, and poured it over me. Cold liquid soaked my hair, dripped down my neck, staining the dress I'd pressed that morning. Gasps rippled around the room, but no one moved to stop him. April flinched, but her mouth stayed shut. Mom's voice split the silence. "You're dead to this family." I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just sat there, sticky and humiliated, feeling more tired than angry. That's when a man in a suit appeared from a side hallway. Mid-40s, clipboard in hand. He introduced himself as Thomas, venue manager. His voice was polite, detached, like he'd seen this kind of spectacle before. "Lorraine, correct? Just confirming you'll be handling the payment today. Once the deposit clears, we're all set." I turned slowly to face him. My father's eyes locked on me, pleading silently. Mom's jaw tightened. April's hands twisted together like rope. I swallowed and spoke clearly enough for every corner of the room to hear. "I'm not paying for this. Cancel the booking." Thomas blinked, pen hovering. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He nodded once, closed his binder, and walked out like this was just another Tuesday. The room exploded. April's face crumpled, not in tears, but in shock, as though she'd just witnessed a betrayal she couldn't name. Drew slammed his empty glass on the table, shouting, "Selfish, always about you!" Mom clutched the back of a chair, voice shrill. "What the hell are you doing? This was supposed to be a gift." Dad's face hardened. He leaned in close enough for me to smell his aftershave. "Don't make a scene," he hissed. "Do your part. You've always done your part." My voice was steady. Not anymore. Then I left. By the time I got home, they were already there. The minute I stepped through the door, the yelling started. Mom's fury ricocheted off the walls. How I embarrassed them, how Brandon's parents arrived just after I stormed out, how I'd made them look poor. Dad sat stiffly at the dining table, hands folded, eyes like stone. "Too independent," he said. "Too proud. Too difficult. Always." April leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her words slicing. "How could you do this to me? I thought we were close." I stared at her. "It would have been nice if you asked me before putting my name on a $30,000 bill." Drew barreled in from the backyard, still red-faced, still shaking. "You're selfish. You act like you're better than us. Like you're above this family." I snapped then. Years of swallowed words broke free. I've been paying half this household's bills for years. Groceries, electric, internet, water, cable. I co-signed your car loan, Drew. I replaced April's laptop. And this is my punishment? Because I said one word? No? The silence after that was colder than ice. Then Dad stood. His tone was calm, deadly. If you're not going to support this family, you don't belong in this house. Pack your things. Leave tonight. No one argued. Not April, not Drew, not even Mom. I looked at each of them in turn. Not one pair of eyes met mine. So I went upstairs, peeled off the sticky dress, pulled out a suitcase, and began to pack. Documents, clothes, my laptop, nothing sentimental. Their voices carried up the stairs, already shifting, already arguing with each other, as if I'd left them a mess to clean. I didn't say goodbye. Instead, I texted Aunt Denise, told her everything. She responded in seconds. Come stay with us. You should have left that house a long time ago. By 9:00 p.m., I was standing on her porch, suitcase in hand. She opened the door in slippers, arms crossed, eyes flashing with equal parts relief and rage. It's about damn time, she muttered, pulling me into the kitchen. She didn't demand details, just handed me a towel, pointed me to the bathroom, and laid out a clean pair of sweatpants. Uncle Ron barely looked up from his baseball game. He gave a little nod over his glasses and said, "Let me guess." Finally said no. I almost laughed. That night, I curled up in the guest room under a pink comforter that smelled like peppermint and detergent. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't hostile. It was calm. I didn't cry. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying how fast it had snapped. How I'd gone from golden child to outcast in a single evening, just because I said the word no. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the exhaustion, something unexpected flickered. Relief. I woke to the sound of a kettle and the scent of butter warming in a pan. Aunt Denise moved around her kitchen like a general in soft slippers, decisive and calm. Scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of water pressed into my hand before questions. Uncle Ron wandered in with the newspaper tucked under his arm and circled 2 rental listings with a blunt pencil. If you're not looking yet, he said, tapping the page, start today. This one's got a washer and dryer. This one's above a bakery. I ate slowly, like breathing after a sprint. My phone lay face down on the table, vibrating every few minutes, missed calls stacking with no voicemails, just the pressure of the family's persistence. I didn't flip it over. After breakfast, I drove to the second listing, a 1-bedroom above a coffee shop. The staircase creaked. The hallway smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted beans. The landlord, a guy named Malcolm with a sweater tied around his shoulders like it was still October, met me at the door. Last tenant moved out 3 days ago, he said. I had a cancellation this morning. If you like it, we can do paperwork today. The apartment was small and bright, with mismatched kitchen tiles that somehow made the sunlight look warmer. The windows faced west. In the late afternoon, the light would pour in, gold and forgiving. I could see myself standing here in socks, making tea, hearing the coffee grinder whir downstairs like a heartbeat. I'll take it, I said. By lunch, I had signed the lease. The pen felt heavy in my hand, like a key forged into ink. When I got back to Denise's, she handed me a cardboard box labeled Kitchen in thick black Sharpie. 2 mugs, a dented pan, mismatched plates. Starter kit, she said. You'll add the rest as you go. She kissed my forehead once, quickly, as if she were afraid I might break if she pressed harder. I drove the first load over right away. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the box of kitchen things. Setting a mug on a shelf felt like planting a flag, ownership in small gestures. I plugged in my phone to charge and watched it light up. 27 missed calls, 11 texts. We need to talk. This isn't over. Call me now. Don't be dramatic. You're making this worse. I turned the phone face down again. Evening came fast. The coffee shop closed. The voices below drifted away. I strung a short line of lights across the balcony railing and took a breath that reached the bottom of my lungs. Then the doorbell at Denise's rang. They were punctual, like people arriving for a performance. My parents stood on the porch with politely composed faces. Mom held a Tupperware container of cookies. Dad had a manila folder tucked under his arm, the same way he used to carry reports for board meetings. Denise opened the door and leaned against the frame like it was her house. It was. And her threshold it was. And she decided who crossed it. She did. We just want a minute with her, Dad said. Denise didn't move. You'll get 5, she said, and stepped aside. They came in and sat on the couch like guests in a waiting room. No small talk. No, how are you? The cookies went on the coffee table as if sugar might season the conversation. Mom started gently. We're worried about you. Things got out of hand. Maybe we all said things we didn't mean. I waited. Dad slid the folder onto the table and straightened it until the edges lined up perfectly with the wood grain. We put together something to keep everything fair, he said, a family support outline. He opened it to a typed sheet. Columns, rows, due dates. My name listed beside every major wedding expense. Venue deposit, already addressed. Catering deposit, dress reimbursement, photography, miscellaneous day of costs. The total at the bottom, $46,809. This way, Dad said. Patient, corporate. No one feels taken advantage of. I stared at the paper. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just structure, a prettier cage. Denise let out a noise that lived somewhere between a laugh and a growl. I didn't take my eyes off the page. Before I could answer, there was another knock. Denise opened the door to Brandon, breathless, hair mussed like he'd parked and ran. He stepped inside and froze when he saw the folder. What is that? Dad lifted his chin half an inch. A plan. To keep us aligned. Brandon looked at me, then at my parents. April told them you volunteered to pay the venue, he said all in one breath, like ripping a bandage. She told everyone that's why it was booked without you, that it was your gift to us. The room went weightless for a second. Soundless, like after lightning when the thunder hasn't hit yet. I turned to my parents. Did either of you ask to see a message from me? A text? Anything? Mom's mouth opened and closed. Dad's face became a mask. Brandon rubbed his temples. I didn't know until last night, he added quietly. I wouldn't have agreed to any of this if I had. Something settled in my chest then, heavy and solid like a stone put in the right place. Denise folded her arms. You better get your girl under control, she told Brandon evenly, because Lorraine's not paying for your wedding, and she's not going back to that house. No one spoke. The cookies sat untouched, sweating under their plastic lid. I picked up the family support outline. For a second, I pretended to fold it carefully, like I might keep it. Then I tore it in half, then in half again. I placed the pieces back on the table deliberately, the way a surgeon sets down instruments. I signed a lease today, I said. I'm not coming back. I'm not your emergency fund, your accountant, or your scapegoat. Mom flinched at the word scapegoat. Dad's fingers drummed once on his knee and stilled. Denise looked at them both. Unless you're here to apologize for all of it, not just the venue, you can go. They left with the cookies. Brandon lingered, eyes darting toward the door like he wanted to run from the mess and also knew he couldn't. Can we talk? He asked me softly. We stepped onto the porch under the yellow cone of the porch light. The grass smelled like it had just been watered. I'm sorry, he said. I'm seeing things differently. April's moving fast. She's already looking at another venue, without me. He tried a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I know this isn't your problem, It isn't, I said. But for what it's worth, you seem decent. If you marry into chaos, make sure it's a choice you're awake for. He swallowed. I'll try to be. Back inside, Denise shut the door with a decisive click. You did good, she said, like a coach at halftime. Now, rest. That night, I moved another box into the apartment. Uncle Ron met me there with a tool bag to tighten the loose cabinet hinge and muttered something about landlords who think screws tighten themselves. Denise stocked my fridge with eggs and fruit and a loaf of bread. They left around 10, turning to wave in the hallway like I was leaving for college all over again. I stood in the kitchen and listened to the building breathe, the hum of the refrigerator, a car passing below, the far-off clatter of dishes from the cafe. I washed one of the mismatched plates and set it upright to dry, pleased by how domestic the sound of water on ceramic could be. My phone buzzed. We need to talk. This isn't over. You can't do this to us. Then another. Call me now. Then. Brandon's parents are furious. Are you happy? I blocked April. The silence after that block was clean. I slept on a mattress on the floor with a blanket for a headboard and woke up lighter than I'd gone to bed. By noon the next day, my parents were back, this time at my place. I watched through the peephole while they hesitated, then knocked softly, as if not to spook a skittish animal. When I opened the door, they didn't comment on the size of the apartment or the scuffed floor or the way the morning light fell across the empty wall. They stood in the middle of the room, careful not to touch anything. We're not here to talk about money, Mom said first. We just want to understand, Dad added. And for once, the words didn't sound like a lead-in for a lecture. They didn't sit. They didn't wander. They stood like people at a hospital bed, uncertain if they were allowed to lean in. Dad spoke slowly. After we left Denise's, Brandon came over. He told us everything. How April handled it, how she said you volunteered. He paused. We never asked to see a text because he looked at the windows instead of at me. Because when she said you offered, it didn't sound wrong. You've done so much without being asked. Mom's hands shook. We used you, she said quietly. Not in some plan. We got used to you fixing things, paying. It felt like family money. Her eyes filled, and for once she didn't fight them. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I didn't know where forgiveness lived yet, where it would sit in the apartment once it arrived, if it arrived at all. Dad reached into his pocket and held out an envelope. Open it later, he said. Please. They left without pressing. No ultimatum, no script. Just the door closing softly behind them. I stood by the window until the sounds downstairs returned to normal, then made tea and waited until the cup was empty to tear the envelope open. Inside was a check for $7,200, the exact total I'd spent covering the house these last 6 months. Electric, groceries, April's car repair, Drew's dentist bill, a note on hotel stationery in Dad's handwriting. We should have seen it sooner. This won't fix everything. It's a start. I placed the check in the drawer beside the stove and closed it. I didn't know if I would deposit it. The decision didn't have to be today. I sat at my small table with the window cracked and made a list on the back of an old envelope. Change mailing address. Buy secondhand desk. Curtains. Budget. Boundaries I won't break. I wrote them down like vows. When the sun dipped, I took the mug out to the balcony and watched the streetlights blink on, one at a time. Somewhere between the first and second light, my phone vibrated again. Another unknown number, then a text. We need to talk about October 18th. Call me. I didn't answer. I added one more line to the list. Prepare for the next pressure point. Because the wedding date was still out there like a buoy in rough water, and my family had always been expert swimmers, strong enough to pull you under while calling it rescue. I wasn't going back in. The first night in my apartment felt like freedom dressed in borrowed clothes. I ate scrambled eggs from one of Denise's mismatched plates and drank tea while the hum of the coffee shop downstairs wound down into silence. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. At dawn, I woke before my alarm, not from noise, but from quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't have anger hiding inside it. Just birds outside the window, the smell of coffee beans drifting up through the floorboards. Then the phone lit up. A text from April. Hope you're happy. Brandon's mad, Mom's crying, Dad's stressed. You destroyed everything. Enjoy your stupid little apartment. I blocked her. The silence that followed felt like shutting a heavy door. That afternoon, Brandon texted, Can we meet? Just talk? I hesitated. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met on my balcony, his tie loosened, eyes tired. He looked less like a fiancé and more like someone who'd stumbled into the wrong play. I didn't know she lied, he said, voice low. She told everyone you offered to pay, and I believed her. But I see now how wrong that was. She's already looking at new venues, Lorraine, without me, trying to get your parents to sign off again. I let him talk. His words tumbled out like stones rolling downhill. Clumsy, unstoppable. I feel like I don't know who I'm marrying, he admitted finally. I looked at him carefully. You're marrying into chaos, Brandon. If you stay, make sure it's with your eyes open. He gave a small pained smile. I think I'm finally seeing. When he left, I didn't feel relief or pity, just a sharper understanding. April hadn't been rattled by exposure. She was regrouping, plotting another angle. And I wasn't going to stand in her way this time. 2 days later, there was another knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw my parents again. Not stiff, not angry, just tired. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. They asked politely, and I stepped aside. They didn't look around or comment on the chipped paint, the small space. They stood in the middle of my living room like visitors in a hospital, careful not to touch. Dad cleared his throat. After Brandon talked to us, we realized. He trailed off, then tried again. We've leaned on you too much, too long. Mom's voice cracked. We treated your income like family money. We just expected, because you always stepped in, always fixed it. Her hands trembled. I'm sorry. I sat in silence, the words hanging in the air. They sounded thin, late, almost foreign. Then Dad reached into his pocket and slid an envelope onto the table. "Open it later, please." They didn't stay. They didn't push. They just left. It took me an hour before I tore it open. Inside was a check for $7,200, the exact amount I'd covered for them over the past 6 months. Groceries, utilities, Drew's dentist, April's car repair, every cent accounted for. On hotel stationery in Dad's square handwriting was a note. "We should have seen it sooner. This won't fix everything, but it's a start." I sat at the small table, staring at it. My chest felt hollow and heavy at the same time. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't repair, but it was acknowledgement. And that was something I'd never been given before. I folded the check and tucked it into the drawer by the stove. I didn't know if I'd deposit it. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. For once, the choice was mine. That night, I unpacked the last box from Denise's. Inside was a stack of framed photos from college, a chipped mug that said "Do not disturb unless you have tacos," and a faded throw blanket. I set them around the apartment slowly, deliberately, like planting markers in new soil. Then I wrote a list on scrap paper. Change mailing address. Buy secondhand desk. Curtains. Budget. Boundaries I won't break. I underlined the last one twice. When the street outside dimmed into quiet, I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and stepped onto the balcony. The lights strung along the railing glowed softly. I breathed in air that was finally mine, unshared, unquestioned. And for the first time, I felt the weight of possibility heavier than the weight of obligation. Because for the first time, I wasn't the family's provider, fixer, or scapegoat. I was just Lorraine. The buzzer startled me. It was late afternoon, the sun stretched thin across my kitchen tiles, and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my breath caught. April. No parents, no fiancé, no entourage, just April. No makeup, hair pulled into a rushed bun, phone in one hand, car keys in the other. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the fight had already drained her before she climbed the stairs. I didn't buzz her in right away. I walked down and opened the door myself. She didn't speak at first. Her lips parted, closed, parted again, as though she'd rehearsed half a dozen speeches and abandoned each of them on the way here. Finally, she said, "Can you give me a minute?" "You have two," I replied. She started talking fast, words spilling like water through cracked glass. "I didn't mean for it to go like that. I panicked when the first venue fell through. Everyone assumed you'd help because you always have. And I thought eventually you'd say yes. You always do." I folded my arms, leaning against the frame. "You told them I volunteered. You didn't just assume." Her eyes darted away. I wanted it to work. Brandon's parents, Mom and Dad, they were so excited. And when you said no, it felt like you were sabotaging everything. It wasn't supposed to blow up like this. "You lied," I said plainly. "And when it came out, you let them all aim it at me." Her voice cracked. "Brandon's barely speaking to me. Mom's a wreck. Dad's cold. Everything's falling apart. Can't you just come back? Not to pay, just to be around. It's different without you." I studied her face, waiting. "Are you sorry?" "For what?" she whispered. "For lying," I said. "For setting me up. For throwing me under a bus you built yourself." Her jaw tightened. Silence. I shook my head slowly. "Then no, I'm not coming back. Not to fix things. Not to sit at the table and play ATM. Not to be the quiet sister who smooths over every disaster. I'm done." She blinked hard, as if bracing against tears she wouldn't let fall. "You're being cold." "No," I said. "I'm being honest." She didn't argue, just turned, walked down the stairs, and left. The sound of her car starting in the street below echoed longer than it should have. I stood in my living room, the quiet thick after the door clicked shut. My heart raced, but underneath was a strange calm, like choosing to walk out of a storm instead of waiting for lightning to strike again. I brewed tea and unpacked the last box Denise had given me. Inside was a desk lamp, a framed picture of me and her at a county fair, and a stack of folded dish towels. I placed them one by one, slow, intentional. The apartment was filling, not with things, but with proof that I existed here. That night, I searched online for a secondhand desk. Found one listed 3 blocks away, a sturdy oak piece, scratched but steady. The seller carried it down with me, dust still clinging to the drawers. In my apartment, it fit perfectly against the wall under the window. I set my laptop on it, plugged in the lamp. For the first time, the space looked like mine, not a stopgap, not a borrowed room, but a beginning. Over the next days, I built a life in increments. Curtains that brushed the floor, A bookshelf from a thrift shop filled with paperbacks and cookbooks Denise insisted I borrow forever. A soft rug rolled out across the floor so my feet didn't touch bare wood in the mornings. Each object whispered a truth louder than any family declaration. I am not going back. At night, I wrote lists, grocery budgets, to-dos, boundaries I wouldn't break. I practiced saying no out loud in the kitchen when no one was there to hear. I liked the sound of it, short, sharp, clean. But family silence is never permanent. It's more like an inhale, waiting to exhale. I knew the wedding date loomed like a storm cloud. Knew another knock, another message, another emergency would come. The difference was, this time, I was ready. I wasn't their fixer anymore. I was just Lorraine. And Lorraine finally had her own life. The morning light in my apartment was different now. Softer, steadier, like it belonged here as much as I did. I woke without alarms, brewed coffee, and sat at the little kitchen table watching steam curl from the mug. No shouting from another room. No footsteps pacing above me. Just quiet, honest quiet. The envelope with Dad's check still sat in the drawer by the stove. Some mornings I opened it, stared at the numbers, then slid it back without touching it. It wasn't about the money, it was about the choice. For once, I had it, and I'd keep it until I decided, on my terms, not theirs. That afternoon, I called Denise. Told her about April's visit, about the half apology that never came. Denise sighed so loudly I could hear Ron in the background say, "What now?" "She didn't come for you," Denise said firmly. "She came for the role you used to play. Let her sit in the silence. That's how people learn." I smiled, small but real. I think I finally believe that. The day settled into rhythm. Work in the mornings, groceries from the corner market where the cashier started recognizing me. Evening walks past the bakery where the scent of fresh bread clung to the air like a blanket. I found a bookshelf at a thrift shop, sanded it down, and painted it the color of sea glass. I unpacked the rest of my photos. College friends, road trips, the one of me and Denise at a county fair eating funnel cake with powdered sugar dusting our noses. Each object I placed felt like I was writing my name on the walls, claiming space that had never been mine before. But family storms don't vanish. They regroup. The text started again. Unknown numbers. We need to talk. Just one meeting. Think about October 18th. I deleted them without answering. I wasn't playing mediator anymore. I wasn't saving face for anyone. One evening, as I chopped vegetables for dinner, the buzzer rang. I expected Denise, maybe Ron. Instead, when I opened the door, it was Dad. Alone. He looked smaller, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed with fatigue. He didn't bring a folder this time. No plan, no pitch. "I'm not here to ask for money," he said quickly, as if rehearsed. "I just wanted to see if you're okay." I studied him, waiting for the hook. None came. "I am," I said simply. He nodded, hands in his pockets. "Your mother. She's trying to come to terms with things. April won't admit anything. Drew's angry at everyone. The house feels..." He trailed off. "Empty." For a moment, guilt flickered in my chest, but it wasn't mine to carry. "Maybe it should feel empty," I said. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just nodded again, as though he'd expected it. Then he left. I locked the door behind him and stood in the silence, heart steady. That night, I made a new list. Deposit check? Maybe, maybe not. Auto pay utilities. Finish painting shelf. Scripts for no. Polite, firm, final. Because I knew another ask would come. Maybe for the wedding, maybe for the aftermath. But I wasn't going to be caught unprepared again. Boundaries weren't just walls. They were scripts, armor, practice. And I was learning to wear them well. The wedding date loomed on the calendar like a shadow, but I no longer felt it pressing on me. It wasn't my burden. Let them scramble. Let them explain. Let them spin. I had stepped off that carousel. On the night before, I sat on my balcony with a pint of ice cream, watching the traffic roll by. The moon was pale and bright, washing the street in silver. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear faint music, probably another wedding, another family spinning a story of perfection. I wasn't part of that anymore. I was free. Weeks later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a card, blank except for a single sentence in my mother's handwriting. "You've done enough. We should have told you sooner." I held it for a long time. It didn't erase years of expectation or the sharp edges of betrayal, but it was acknowledgement. Maybe the first true one. I placed it in the same drawer as the check. Not forgiven, not forgotten. Just kept. proof that I wasn't imagining the weight I'd carried. That night, I curled up on the couch, the lamp glowing warm against the sea glass bookshelf, the string lights twinkling on the balcony. The world outside hummed steady, and for once, I wasn't bracing for the next crash. I thought of April's face at my door, of Dad's envelope, of Mom's note, of all the years I'd measured love in dollars and loyalty in silence. And then I thought of this, a quiet kitchen, a mug cooling beside me, and no one demanding I save them. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was simple. And it was mine. For the first time in my life, I chose peace over family. And everything was finally starting to get better. For me.